the summer of 1952, inside a quiet Dallas neighborhood, a little boy took a breath that would change his life forever. His name was Paul Alexander. He was only 6 years old when a sudden fever struck, an invisible virus that paralyzed his body in a single night and stole from him the simple, effortless act of breathing. Doctors said he wouldn't survive. Machines surrounded him. Hope seemed distant, fragile, almost impossible. Yet, Paul refused to surrender. What followed was not just the fight for oxygen, but the fight for dignity, for purpose, for a life worth living. Inside a steel chamber, the world called an iron land. Paul built dreams, earned degrees, became a lawyer, wrote books, inspired millions, and proved something extraordinary. You don't need to move your body to move the world. You just need a heart that refuses to stop. Tonight, you will hear the story of a man who lived 90 years inside a machine, but whose spirit was never imprisoned. A story of courage, of resilience, of a boy who grew into a legend without ever taking a single free breath. This is the unforgettable journey of Paul Alexander. In the summer of 1952, Dallas was hot enough to make the air ripple above the roads. It was the kind of heat that softened the edges of time and blurred the sounds of passing cars. Children ran barefoot across cracked sidewalk, chasing each other between rows of houses shaded by tired trees. 7-year-old Paul Alexander belonged to that world with a kind of pure, restless energy. He spent his days racing through the neighborhood, building forts from whatever he could find, and imagining himself a hero in every game. His laughter filled the air as he sprinted across dusty yards, splashed water at friends, and returned home each evening with bruised chins, tangled hair, and stories of another adventure. His parents watched him with the quiet pride of people who believed their son had a long, ordinary, happy life ahead of him. But in the same bright summer, newspapers warned of a silent danger, polio, a virus that had already struck thousands of children across the country. Parents whispered about hospitals overflowing with patients, about iron lungs lined up in long rows, about the fear of waking up to find their child unable to walk or breathe. Yet for Paul's family, polio was just a word, distant and unreal, until one night when it became the center of their world. It began with a simple headache. Paul complained of being tired, which was unusual for a boy who normally had to be coaxed into bed. By the next morning, he had a fever and stiffness in his neck. His mother assumed he had caught a cold. But as the hours passed, his condition worsened. His arms felt heavy, his legs trembled, and his breathing became shallow. That afternoon, he collapsed trying to stand. His father lifted him in his arms and rushed to the nearest hospital. His heart pounding in fear, he tried to hide. Doctors examined Paul quickly, exchanging looks that said more than words could. When they finally told the family their suspicion, polio, his mother felt the world slip out from beneath her. Before she could gather her thoughts, Nurses moved Paul into an emergency ward filled with children suffering similar symptoms. Some lay still, unable to move. Others gasped for air. His mother reached for him as they rolled him away, but the doors closed before she could step inside. That night, Paul's life, his childhood, his freedom, everything he knew changed forever. Shortly after arriving at the hospital, Paul's breathing weakened dangerously. His chest muscles had begun to shut down, leaving him unable to draw in air. Doctors moved fast. They brought in a massive machine, strange and intimidating, cylinder, nearly as long as a bed. It was painted yellow, with a small porthole, window near the top, and rubber seals that opened to receive a patient. This was the Iron Lung, a device designed to breathe for people whose bodies no longer could. When Paul saw it rolling toward him, he didn't understand what it was. He only knew that he was terrified and struggling for air. Nurses lifted him gently and slid his body inside the machine, leaving only his head outside. As they secured the collar around his neck, he felt trapped, frightened, and confused. The lid closed with a soft but final sound. Then the machine began to operate. Steady rhythm filled the room. Whose clank, whose clank. Its cycle forced his chest to rise and fall, pushing air into his lungs before pulling it out again. It felt unnatural at first, almost like drowning backward. He tried to lift his arms, but they didn't respond. He tried to call for his mother, but the machine drowned out his voice. Only her hand, reaching through a narrow slot to touch his hair, gave him any comfort. She whispered that she was there, that he was safe, but her voice trembled with fear. Doctors told his parents that the next few days would be critical. Many children didn't survive once the virus reached their lungs. The hospital ward echoed with cries, the hiss of machines, and the silence that followed when one stopped. Paul heard everything from inside, what felt like a metal coffin. But Paul held on. Every day he survived the doctors. Every day he fought against the virus that had taken control of his body. The Iron Lung, frightening as it was, became his lifetime life. Although he hated the confinement and the noise, he began to synchronize with the rhythm of the machine. It kept him alive, and slowly, the terror of the first days softened into a dependence he could not avoid. Weeks turned into months. Paul remained inside the Iron Lung, watching the world in reverse through a mirror angled above his head. He could see the ceiling, the light, the faces of nurses leaning over him, and sometimes other children being wheeled in or out. He surrendered to a new reality. His world was now metal walls, mechanical breathing, and the uncertain future of a child whose life had been rearranged without warning. Life inside the Iron Lung was unlike anything the child could imagine. Paul lay flat on his back for hours, days, weeks. unable to move, unable to sit, unable to turn his head more than a little. His body belonged to the machine, and everything he did depended on nurses adjusting the controls or moving him slightly. He learned to communicate in whispers, learned to swallow again with difficulty, and learned to endure the endless monotony of flying in a cylinder, with nothing but a mirror to connect him to the outside world. The world around him was filled with children in similar conditions. Some cried for their mothers, others made soft sounds but were barely human. Some lay silently with eyes open but no longer responsive. Paul listened to the story of every child through the rhythm of machines and the footsteps of nurses. But amid all that fear and suffering, Paul's spirit did not fade when therapists introduced an exercise called frog breathing. They explained that some patients could learn to use the muscles in their throat and mouth to gulp air into their lungs manually. It would allow him to stay outside the iron lung for a few minutes at a time. It would be difficult, exhausting, and dangerous. Many adults failed at it, but Paul, still just a boy, decided he would try. The first attempts were terrifying. As soon as they opened the iron lung and Paul tried to breathe on his own, he felt like he was suffocating again. He gasped, choked, trembled, and begged for the machine to resume. But each day he tried again. He learned to gulp air, trapping it in his throat and forcing it downward. Seconds of manual breathing became minutes. Minutes became longer intervals. Slowly, painfully, he proved that he could survive brief periods outside the machine. It was the first sign that his life might not always be confined to metal walls. Even so, he still depended on the iron lung for most of the day. Hospitals across America were phasing out these massive machines as new technologies emerged. But Paul remained in his. It was the only world he had known since childhood. He decorated the small space he could see around the machine. Nurses placed books on stands above him so he could read. He learned to tolerate the loneliness, the confinement, and the strange routine of living between breath cycles. And while other children left the hospital, either recovered or carried away in silence, Paul stayed. Was one of the rare survivors whose body was left almost completely paralyzed. But survival meant possibility. It meant that somehow, someday, he might carve out a life that was more than what the virus had left him with. When Paul was finally well enough to leave the hospital, the world he returned to felt unfamiliar. His home had been rearranged around the giant iron lung to make space for it. His parents did their best to adjust, but their son's life now revolved around the machine the size of a refrigerator. Most nights, Paul slept inside the iron lung. During the day, with great difficulty and only for short periods, he could come out to practice frog breathing. But every part of his life required assistance. He could not move his arms or legs. He could not sit up. He could not hold objects, and yet his mind was bright, hungry for knowledge, desperate to return to school. The school system, however, was not ready for him. Several principals rejected him, saying they had neither the space nor the staff to support a student who depended on an iron leg. It was an era with little awareness or accommodation for people with disabilities. But Paul refused to accept a lifetime of being left behind. Eventually, after relentless insistence from his mother, and after officials realized that denying him access was morally unjustifiable, he was allowed to attend school. His iron leg was placed temporarily in a room where teachers could reach him. Classmates stared, unsure what to make of the boy whose life depended on a giant machine. But Paul worked harder than anyone else. He wrote using a stick held in his mouth. He read by having books positioned carefully above him. He participated in class discussions from inside the iron leg. His intelligence became impossible to overlook. The teachers who doubted him slowly changed their minds. His friends grew used to the strange machine, and day by day, he rebuilt the childhood the virus had stolen from him. This time, with determination instead of running feet. Paul grew older, and with maturity came ambition. He was content merely to survive or to complete school. He wanted a future. He wanted to contribute. He wanted independence in whatever form he could achieve. By the time he reached high school, he had already mastered frog breathing well enough to attend classes for short periods outside the iron leg. He continued to study with a fierce determination of someone who understood exactly how precious life was. When he graduated from high school, he did so at the top of his class. His next dream was something almost unthinkable, given his condition, attending college. The University of Texas initially rejected his application, unsure how to accommodate a student who needed an iron leg to live. Paul pushed back. He argued that he deserved the same opportunities as anyone else. His persistence worked, and the university admitted him. His iron leg was installed in a dormitory room, and volunteers helped him with daily tasks. Despite the challenges, Paul excelled academically. He studied late into the night, memorizing lengthy text, attending lectures when he could. His determination impressed both professors and classmates, proving that intelligence and persistence and perseverance could overcome even the most daunting physical barriers. After earning his degree, Paul set his sight even higher. Law school. It was a grueling path, even for a fully healthy student. But Paul never let his physical limitations define his intellectual capacity. He attended classes, completed assignment, and prepared argument while lying back flat in the iron leg. He dictated exams, studied complex legal theories, and built the foundation for a career most people assume was impossible for him. His classmates admired him. His professors respected him. His achievement defied every expectation. Applying for the bar exam was another challenge in itself. Administrators had to figure out how to accommodate a candidate who could not sit up or write independently. They eventually placed him in a private room where he took the exam lying in the iron lag, dictating his answers to Proctor. It was a test of endurance as much as a test of knowledge, but Paul had mastered endurance long before he mastered legal theory. When the result finally arrived, he had passed. Paul Alexander became an attorney. He practiced law for years, specializing in cases involving marginalized people, those denied justice, those discriminated against, those whose voices were ignored. His own experience of being dismissed and overlooked made him fiercely dedicated to fairness. Client trusted him, not just because he was competent, but because he understood struggle on a profound level. His legal career became a testament to the idea that limitations do not determine destiny. He became known in legal circles, gave interviews, and inspired countless people simply by doing what many believed he could never do. Even as ventilators replaced iron legs in hospitals, Paul remained in his. It had become part of him, an extension of his life. He called it his old iron horse. Despite depending on it, he lived a remarkably rich life. He read constantly, used a computer with adaptive equipment, painted miniatures with a mouth-held brush, and wrote an autobiography titled 3 Minutes for a Dog, recounting his extraordinary journey. His stories spread across the internet, inspiring people around the world. He appeared in documentaries, interviews, and online forums, sharing his philosophy of resilience and personal responsibility. Over the decades, Paul outlived nearly everyone else who had been placed in an iron lag. Children who had shared the polio ward with him had passed away decades earlier. Adults who once used iron legs had transitioned to other forms of ventilation or succumbed to their illness. But Paul kept going. His iron leg, now an ancient machine by modern standards, continued to breathe for him with unwavering rhythm. Mechanics who understood how to repair such devices became harder to find, yet he always managed to maintain it. Volunteers, friends, and strangers helped when needed. The machine that once terrified him became the one constant companion he trusted completely. Despite severe physical limitations, Paul maintained sharp wit, a determined spirit, an unbroken desire to contribute to the world. He became a symbol of resilience. Universities invited him to speak. Journalists profiled him. Young, disabled people brought to him for inspiration. Even as he aged, he never stopped pushing forward. His story traveled far beyond Texas, touching hearts around the globe. Through it all, he remained humble, often saying that he survived not because he was extraordinary, but because he simply refused to give up. Paul Alexander passed away on March 11, 2024. At the age of 78, his death marks the end of one of the longest survivals in an iron lag in history. For more than 7 decades, he had lived inside the same machine, a relic of a bygone era, yet remained fully engaged with the world. His passing was met with tribute across social media. news outlets, and communities of people whose lives he had touched. He left behind a legacy far greater than his disability or his struggle with polio. He left behind proof that human strength does not come from the body, but from the spirit. Paul showed the world that a life can be meaningful, even when it doesn't look like anyone else's. He proved that persistence can reshape fate, that determination can overcome almost any barrier, and that the human heart is capable of astonishing resilience. His legacy continues to inspire people facing illness, disability, or adversity. In every interview he gave, every story he told, and every challenge he overcame, he carried one message: you can build a life worth living, no matter how difficult your circumstances are. Paul Alexander survived polio, but more importantly, he survived despair. He built a life of purpose inside a machine, meant only to keep him alive. And in doing so, he became a reminder that courage, not physical strength, is what carries us through the world. Paul Alexander spent a lifetime inside a metal machine, but he lived more fully than many who walk freely under the sun. His story is a reminder that our bodies can be limited, but our will, our hope, and our spirit are boundless. He showed us that victory is not measured by how far we travel, but by how deeply we live. He showed us that even inside the tightest space, a human heart can remain wide open. As you finish this story, ask yourself, what excuse is stronger than Paul's determination? What could possibly stop you if a man who couldn't move could still rise, still learn, still love, still inspire? Paul Alexander may have lived in an iron land, but his legacy breathes everywhere. And tonight, because you listened to his story, his breath lives in you too. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without sharing it. Someone out there needs the reminder that impossible is not a wall, it's a door. Thank you for watching Real Talk Stories. Stay inspired, stay strong, and keep breathing hope into the world.